My name's Nicola. I'm one of the main founders and the managing director of Flourish Together, one of the partners in the We Lead for Legacy programme, which is backed by the GMCA and led by She Leads for Legacy and supported also by Reform Radio. We're pleased to bring a series of webinars all about getting into public life, public appointments, and this is the first in the series, so we're really excited to be welcoming you along to this. And for anybody listening again, hope you find it really interesting. We wanted to make sure, we've jumped there. We wanted to make sure that we had time for a bit of a panel conversation and also a Q&A. So I'm just showing you what's coming up. I'm gonna hand over to my colleague Atiha Chaudry in a second, who's going to lead the rest of the session and chair the panel. But she'll have a chat with our panel and do some intros before we get into some questions. Then about 1 o'clock-ish, we'll get into a bit of Q&A. You can put your questions in the chat or save them until then. We're looking at wrapping up about 1:15, 1:30, and let you get back on with your day. So thanks for joining this. I think it's going to be fascinating. We have had discussions about public appointments in very varied styles throughout the programme. Really looking forward to hearing more about the highs and lows and the routes to becoming a magistrate and supporting more people from racial and minoritized backgrounds into that kind of role. So I think without further ado, I shall hand over to Atiha Chaudry here and she'll carry on with the session.
Thank you ever so much. Welcome, everyone. My name is Atiha Chaudry. I'm one of the Enterprise and Learning Managers at Flourish Together CIC. And I'm very pleased to introduce our panel members today. Firstly, here we have Cody Garpare, and she is a beauty industry entrepreneur, cancer survivor, and founder of the multi-award-winning C-Lash. She's a mentor, coach, and a TEDx speaker. And Cody also sits as a magistrate for us in Greater Manchester. Secondly, we have Kofo Oyeleye, and Kofo is a social entrepreneur, strategist, and coach who is passionate about improving lives, whether that's through personal mentoring or public service. He is the founder and CEO of VES, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the promoting and facilitating civil engagement in communities in the UK. And hopefully joining us soon would be Atiha Chaudry. Atiha has extensive health inequalities and socioeconomic research expertise, as well as community and voluntary sector experience of over 25 years of being in community work, including serving in important civic and community roles. And so, with that being said, and I'm sure you're all on tenterhooks to start engaging with our panel members. But before we start that, I'll just stop sharing the screen really quickly so we can see our panel members. Cody, Kofo. Hello, hello. Let's hear your lovely voices. Hi, Cody.
Hi.
Hello, Kofo.
Hi, can you hear me now? Okay. Perfect.
I can hear you. Yes, we can hear you and we can see you. Thank you so much. And we're so grateful for everyone who's attending this webinar live right now. And just so we get right stuck into it, I would love to just put this question straight to you, first of all, Cody, in terms of how did you even get into becoming a magistrate? Like, where did that journey even start for you to just think you could be in that civic role?
I think like most movements, and I would like to call it a movement, most movements starts with anger, and it starts with wanting to right a wrong and wanting to bring justice where you feel there was no justice. I've got two boys, one is 16 and one is 24, and my 24-year-old got involved with the wrong crowd, and he's now doing very well. He's got his own place and stuff. But at that time, what happened was he was charged with drug trafficking. And I won't bore you with the details of what happened, but then it then turned out that he was never in the place that he was accused of being in. The case rested on the fact that they had found my son's fingerprints on the bags of drugs that they found. When we then asked for this evidence, we found out that it was never, they never had that evidence, because my son kept insisting that, Mom, I'm not saying I'm a saint, but I did not do this. And that was when my journey started. So it was, I'm going to be a magistrate and I'm going to change the world and I'm going to show them, you know, it's like our black men shouldn't be treated like this. But I always say that my journey made me realize something, that for every person who's not doing their job right and is giving the justice system a bad name, there are 10 other people who are working really, really hard and doing things really, really properly. And those people they don't get the thanks that they deserve. And for me, I always say this, I then took my soapbox and turned it into a chair. And I realized for me to be effective as a magistrate, what I needed to do was listen, because I had 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I needed to listen and learn before I started teaching.
Thank you so much for being so open with that story. And I think it's really interesting that the highlight on listening, you know, amongst the whole host of things, when people think of civic duty, I don't think a lot of the time people recognize how much just that humanity and listening to understand is. So thank you for kicking us off with that wonderful response. And then I'm going to go to you, Kofo, in a moment. I just want to welcome Atiha, our third panel member. Thank you so much for joining us, Atiha. And I will be coming to you after Kofo responds to this question, in terms of how did you get into supporting people into roles as magistrates? Like, what was that journey like for you to make the decision to do it, and how did you start doing it yourself?
Thank you so much, Aisha, for organizing this and giving me the opportunity to add something. I think my journey for me started around 2010. I was working on a program with the Liverpool Council with young people in 2010, and I noticed they were making complaints about the government, you know. But then I began to ask them questions. Okay, have you spoken to your MP about this? Did you know who your MP was? I asked them, do you know who your councillor is? They had no idea. So for that was a bell for me to do something about it. And I've been doing my research, attending different courses. And I think 2014 election, I was reading quite a bit, and I noticed a lot of people were talking, but people were not voting. And this is, as a community, we love to be reactive and not proactive. I decided to step out and do something about it to encourage voting in the community, number one, encourage people standing for election. And yeah, so at different levels, being a school governor, magistrate, councillors, you see, and we've seen people become school governors, even within the student union, begin to take responsibility. Because I believe every individual has a right, but I also believe with the right comes a responsibility. And the responsibility means you being the change you want to see. Society does not respond to talks. You have to be in the room when discussions are being made about your destiny. Which is why I decided to step out and do what I do today. Thank you.
I really appreciate the thoroughness of that response in such a small amount of time. I think sometimes it can feel like we have to be the people in the action, like I have to be the magistrate or I have to be the school governor. And it's a thing where it's clear that we all have different roles to play, and the amount of people who have been able to be empowered through the work that you've gone on to learn, not necessarily you specifically being in that position, but enabling so many more people to do that, just like you are today, is pretty extraordinary. I'm feeling so inspired, but this is not my private talk, so I'll behave. And I would like to come to you with a new question, Atiha. Welcome. I introduced you a little before. It was a phenomenal introduction, by the way, just so you know, Atiha. But I would like to know, in your journey to becoming a magistrate, what kind of training did you need? What kind of path did you require to actually get into the role when you did?
Yeah, so I became a magistrate in 2002 which is an awful long time ago. I'm quite old now. And I think I was always inspired by civic duty and the fact that we can talk about all the inequalities and injustices that are done to us, but we need to get around the tables to ensure that those injustices don't happen in the first place. So I think I was quite aware of the, in those days, I think certainly the representation of Black and Asian and ethnic minority communities on magistrates' benches was very, very low. And I was approached quite earlier than 2002 when they were quite looking to increase diversity and also get more younger people onto the benches. So in those days, I knew that the benches weren't demographically representative of the communities. And for me, it was really important that we make a contribution and be around the tables and do that. So that's kind of why I got involved and engaged, because I felt that I wanted to balance that and to give justice properly. I didn't need any training as such to apply to be a magistrate, but it's really important to have, objective thinking and understand community and all of that, because you do get asked those things and judged on that in terms of the process and the interviews, etc., to become a magistrate. But because you get all your training once you become a magistrate, and there is an awful lot of training that you do get and lots of support. In certainly, I don't know what happens today, but when I became a magistrate, I had almost a 1 year long intensive training and also a mentor. And then after that, you continue to receive continuous training for the rest of your sort of time as a magistrate. There's a lot of training and support that's provided and guidance. So you are supported quite well. And if I can just say, at the time that I became a magistrate, one of the reasons I had reluctance initially, because I had a very young family and a full-time job, and I was a bit anxious and worried about how I would be able to fulfill my magistrate role. And I know that my bench, so I sat at Stockport Magistrates Court, were incredibly supportive of me. And, I know that with my children at the time were at primary school level and nursery, I got huge amounts of support for everything that I needed to do. And I was always well supported by the courts to enable me to work, as well as my children to be cared for, and for me to take responsibility for being a magistrate, as well as the training that goes with it.
Thank you so very much. And that's probably a question that I would have had for you, or for the whole panel, in terms of balancing the requirements of your life as well as performing civic duty, because ultimately it's an additional thing that is not something you can necessarily do in your sleep. It's not volunteering to do litter picking in the community. It is something that it seems like it takes a considerable amount of emotional energy, intellectual capacity, and just time to engage with it correctly. So with that in mind, then I'll come back to you, Cody. If you could let us know some highlights of doing this work now, where you're finding that it feels effective and it feels empowering, or at least it feels like it's not something that is taken away from you, but that you're able to provide value to yourself and the community with.
I think some of the highlights, there are quite a few. I think because I'm a new magistrate, it's like I've got limited number of sittings that I've done. But then in that time, there are days when you go home and you want to just pour a glass of wine and get under the covers. And then there are days when you feel like you have really made a difference. And in those days, you come home. And I think the one thing that I've always realized is when you're sitting on a bench with a diverse panel is quite different from when you are sitting on a bench with, say, 2 white males, because it feels like you're the only one with a different kind of thinking, and everything is sort of like, so when I come in and I not challenge, but then put across my viewpoint, and people stop and actually listen, you would find someone would come in who's probably I can identify with, because I come from sort of like what can I say? I'm not middle class, I'm lower class. So when I come in and I see somebody who's coming in and they're saying, oh, I haven't paid my fine because, you know, it's like I didn't have the money, and someone wouldn't understand why that mother didn't go out and get a job or go out and get help. But I do understand that sometimes when you're in that situation, even stepping out of your bedroom and going to have a shower and actually going to ask for such help is quite a challenge. So for me, in times like that, when I bring a different look on things, when I sort of like, I feel like I've represented somebody who probably wouldn't have had a voice in this situation. I think that's when I like, apart from the fact, apart from the day, obviously, when I was sworn in, absolutely an absolute highlight for me. And like what was mentioned by Atiha, the fact that you have constant supervision and there's hands coming out of the darkness to lift you up, whoever you're sitting on the bench, especially the older magistrates that sit with you, they can't do enough to help you. So on days like that, when I feel like I have grown today as a magistrate, those days I really feel like, yeah, this has been a good day.
Thank you so much for that. I think it's such a strong and clear display of the value and the necessity of lived experience being in the room, of people not only learning about how people may be living or even having empathy, but having that actual lived experience. So we definitely want to encourage more people from different backgrounds and different communities to join civic service and be magistrates, so more of those experiences can be highlighted. So thank you very much for that. And I'll send that same question back to you, Atiha. What's been a highlight for you in your time as a magistrate?
Yeah, so I mean, I've served 17 years as a magistrate, and then I've gone on to the supplementary list, which I am currently on. And I don't think any day of mine, apart from I think towards the end of my 17 years, that I didn't think I was adding some value to what I was doing. And I've thoroughly enjoyed being a magistrate. And the only reason I've come off on the supplementary list is because of my own capacity and timing. And, you know, it may well be I go back on another court at some point in my life still. But I have enjoyed every moment of what I did. And when I joined the Stockport bench, I think there were probably only amongst the over 100 magistrates at that bench, probably about 4 of diversity, black diversity like myself. So it was a predominantly white magistrates court, and I went in with thinking, oh, wonder what this is going to be like, and whether there's going to be understanding of diversity and the different experiences people have. And I think, everybody comes with a lived experience regardless on the bench, and that's what they come with an offer. And somebody will know something about the things that are in front of you when you're in court, whether that is familiarity with the area or the geography or the community and things like that. So I think everybody does come with that. And I can tell you that I was pleasantly surprised and put away all my thinking about all the magistrates I have sat with in those 17 years have been really marvelous people. Absolutely. And they all come from different social classes and the different communities. And you might find a few instances where you've had to challenge some things because of yourself, but generally, it's a very supportive environment. And generally, you are an equal you know, I was used to sitting 3 on a bench. You're an equal third person on that bench, and you know, you can say, you know, you can give your input, and decisions are taken on that basis. And I've very much felt empowered to do that and supported to do that through the training that we got, and by also my colleague magistrates that I sat with. So it's been an incredibly positive experience, and everything that you learn, you do use in the rest of your kind of life, and the skills and learning you pick up is phenomenal. There are some very difficult decisions you sometimes have to make. And as a new magistrate, and you might find it, I mean, my first sitting, I remember we had to send somebody to prison for 6 months. That was hard on my first sitting. So there are things that you'll need to kind of grasp with and get through, and then you know that you're doing the right thing for the people that are in front of you, and you know, there is proper justice happening there, and you have to believe in that and make sure that you provide that input and represent you know, good justice in your community.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Atiha. A very powerful statement that I just heard in that is feeling equal on the bench, because I feel like, especially in the UK right now, there is so much out there talking about inequity in all its forms. And for you to have felt, even in the early 2000s, that you were equal on the bench when it came to decision making, it just feels really empowering and really uplifting. So I really appreciate you sharing that. So I'm going to come to you, Kofo, as you support a lot of people to get into civic service. What do you find are perhaps the most consistent challenges that people have, even just going into it? What are the kind of things that they say, I can't do it because? And then if you could also share part of the challenges that people seem to face once they've started, still feeling like they can't continue for whatever reason.
Thank you once again for that, Aisha. You know, for me, it is not just something you do, it's a call for me to be the change that I want to see. I think one of the first thing I have to deal with when I try to educate people, I don't like to use the word convince, to consider public service, is the fact that I always notice there's this traumatic experience that people have had as a community or as a people that they first need to push through. The fact they feel they wouldn't get in, or the fact they feel there's not going to be anybody like me there. But I always say to them, it only takes one person, you know, to start doing something. And it's essential we are in this spaces. You know, I love what Cody said about, you know, being in the room and having a certain level of understanding that other people don't have. And sometimes laws are passed by people who don't really understand a certain community. So it's essential people from that community are in these rooms, which are things I try to make people that I speak to, and the conferences that I speak at, for people to understand that you need to be in this room. You need to be in this room to be the change you want to see, you say. And the second thing for me also is there's going to be obstacles. There will be obstacles, because it's like you climbing up a hill. So you just don't expect it's going to be smooth. There's going to be people who will be against you. There's going to be people who don't want you in the room. So you have to be ready for all that, you see. And totally for me is people also need to remember why they enter this room and why they are staying in this room. So it doesn't become a thing of self, but it's this thing of service. It just doesn't become a thing of having titles or putting letters behind your name, you see. But it's a thing of service. People should not forget that, because one thing I find easy also is people getting into these rooms and forgetting why they came in the first place. And they become part of the establishment, think like the establishment. And, you know, they forget they came in to make changes. And sometimes when you are in those rooms, you know, the principles or parameters can sometimes change you to become like the establishment to survive, you see. So you also have to have that stubborn spirit to stay as you came in, you see. So these are the challenges I think a lot of people deal with. You know, people who deal with racism. You know, I had a program I did once with the police, and we were able to get some people from the community to recruit into the police. And I spoke to one of the guys recently who is not part of the police anymore. And, you know, the things he was sharing with me, you know, his mental health, you know, the kind of thing were culturally against him. People were just trying to, wasn't fitting, you know, part of the group, you know, due to his color and his beliefs. And, you know, people were just trying to catch him out because they didn't really accept him into the fold, you see. So things like that, you will deal with. You just need to know why you're going to what you're going to. So yeah.
Wow, just so many gems from this already. This idea of not just a thing of self, but a thing of service is so, so important. And it's so easy. Well, not easy, but I feel like it is something where the system perfectly absorbs people if you're not really steadfast in what it is that you want to do and understand your whys and the necessity of the work that you're looking to do in a certain space. So I think it's an amazingly powerful statement. I think I'm going to make myself a poster of just that, of that wording. I'm going to come back to you, Cody, with regards to the more practical elements of being a magistrate and how outside of the courtroom, how does that affect the way you engage in civic life? Like, what is it of being a magistrate that you see, that you take with you? If you do, you might not take anything out of the courts, but I doubt it. What is it? How does it affect the way that you work in the community outside of being in the courtroom?
I think one thing that being a magistrate is teaching me is to be listening to understand, not to wait to reply. Is teaching me to have not to have preconceived ideas about situations. It's very easy for someone to walk in and before they even open their mouth, you have made a conclusion about who a person is. And when you go in court and you're forced day in, day out to not only challenge your own views, but then sometimes put yourself to task when the evidence is presented and you then realize, you know, it's like my own thinking, because remember, I was a civilian before and I'm being trained in, like I said, I'm a new magistrate, and this is something that I have to constantly, unlike somebody who's been, like my colleague over here who's been a magistrate for a while, you then get to a point where you automatically think like that. For me, it has to be something that I have to remind myself, like, I am here to do a job. What do the guidelines say? What is it that I am seeing? What does the evidence say? What is it that I'm here to do? So regardless of what I think and what I feel, I am here to do a job, and that's what I do. And I think when I go out in the community, it is then bleeding out into, tell me what I need to know before I make a judgment in this situation. Even with my kids, I am starting to wanting to listen and understanding, why did you do that? How do you think you could have done things differently? And so I take a lot longer now to make decisions than I've done in the past. And it can be frustrating for people who've always known me to make decisions. But I think in the long run, I find that I make more robust decisions, and I am more likely to stand by the decisions that I take a bit longer to think about.
Wow, that is an amazing character development. Extending, you've got some claps from people in the chat room there. I think it's an absolutely amazing development, and yeah, it's given me things to think about now even. So I guess the same question to you, Atiha, as your experience is different. I wonder if you could tell us more about how being a magistrate affected your other work specifically, as opposed to your personal experience.
Yeah, I suppose that what you do as a magistrate is you listen a lot to people. You discuss the situation with colleagues who might have a different perspective and look on it because they bring a different lived experience to it. you work as a team. It teaches you to teamwork a lot because you sat there together as an equal team. And it does give you that discipline in terms of how you actually work, how you listen to people's stories and people's experiences, and how you respond to that in a way that makes a difference. So I think you kind of take that into your daily life in terms of the discipline with which you undertake all your work, how deeply you read things, how deeply you listen, and what type of questions that you might want to pose to clarify situations. And you get a lot of that in court in front of you. You get a situation and there's lots of questions in your mind. And that's where you work as a team to kind of say, well, can we have a clarification on this or a clarification on that? So it teaches you to, I suppose, the research element and the investigative work that one has to do in lots of different ways when you're running things in the community. So those broader qualities and skills, I suppose, really get consolidated in terms of every other part of your work, I suppose. The other thing I think it makes you do, and for myself particularly, because I do quite a lot of work in the community, is behind you, you're always kind of looking at how the community lives, how the community works, what are the challenges for the community, how do situations happen. So you're always looking out and reading a lot more that you see in the media, which is a massive influencer, isn't it? And how the media portrays particular stories and particular judgments that are made, and how justice is portrayed. So I think it gives you that wider ability to be a lot more alert outside of the courts in everything that you do, so that you feel that when you are sitting in court, you've got a very broad breadth of understanding of community, so that you can bring that expertise to the decisions you make.
Truly appreciated, truly appreciated the reminder to always be looking out, because I think it can, we can often take for granted being a de facto or technical member of a community and assume that our circumstance is representative of the community, or that we broadly understand what's happening around us and forget how unique our experiences often can be. And I think it's a lesson that it was a hard one for me to learn as a social entrepreneur myself, to remind myself that I personally am not typical of the community that people would ordinarily associate me with, and to always continue to remind myself to look outside and keep informed and keep learning. So thank you for that succinct reminder. So the last question I'm going to throw out to everyone, this is the last question from me before we open up for the Q&A from the people who have joined us for this call. I think it's more to do with why we are doing why the We Lead for Legacy program exists. We're trying to diversify the civic service here in Greater Manchester. But I would like to hear from everyone, and feel free to be the person who goes first, but why or how essential, or why do you feel like it's essential for us to have a more culturally diverse, racially diverse community of magistrates or people in civic service? What are the things that you see that you feel like perhaps you haven't already said to us that means it's really important that we are ensuring that the civic service is representative of the community that we exist in? I'll pick on someone. Oh, there you go, Atiha.
So I think it is about the fact that the magistrate community and the benches must reflect the community that we live in. So, when I first joined, you could kind of have on my bench 3 white male magistrates. And in front of you, you might have, an Asian person, that you know who had a particular, maybe the magistrates have no idea about that person's life at all. So it is about that lived experience issue, but also that broader knowledge and understanding of the community. I mean, one of the reasons I joined when I did and why I was selected when I was the geography from which I was coming. So it's not just about diversity in terms of race, it's about gender, it's about disability, it's about geography. You know, so you get road traffic offences, for example. You really kind of, when I used to sit, I completely knew exactly where in my geography that road offence had happened. So I could picture it quite well. So it is about ensuring that that wider experience is there and that people feel that they are getting proper justice because benches reflect the communities that we live in. And that happens. And it's not just about the bench. It happens in other walks of life as well, doesn't it? In terms of funding applications, for example, and funding for people. If you've got a panel that's representative of different communities, you're going to feel a lot more confident about what your decision might be, because every part of the you know, experience will have been understood much better.
Thank you so much. An awareness of the geography. It wasn't something that I had considered personally at all, really, but I can see how it would make sense to have that sort of awareness and be able to provide context to people who may not be aware of the geography as well. Now, I'm happy to forward the question to other people. Have you got any thoughts, Cody, Kofo?
Yeah, I think the whole magistrate thing was, I don't know the actual phrasing, but then being judged by your peers. So your peers is, and it's like, if I've committed a crime, I have to go in front of people who look like me, because that then meant that those people have an understanding and empathy and sort of like they can put themselves in my shoes. So when they judge me, they know the circumstances in which this occurred. So for someone who say lives in, we are Northerners, and you know, it's like I make fun and say I'm Zimbabwean by birth, but Northerner by choice. Someone in London doesn't understand, you know, it's like what I call the Northern thing. It's not probably it's not probably a very good example, but then having that diversity just means that if somebody comes and they look like me, not only does that give me a chance to probably listen to them with a different ear, but then it also gives, because it also gives the person who is standing in the dock or whoever is in the court confidence that it's not just people who don't know me. Because, you know, sometimes people say, I felt like there was a white screen in front of me. I was talking to a white screen. You can see that, you know, it's like having a diverse panel. Even the discussions are a lot more diverse and are a lot more, and I don't know, because I'm speaking from my own experience as a magistrate, the way I have said, yes, we do have an equality when we're sitting. I'm 1/3 of the bench. But when I say that, I wasn't saying that I wasn't feeling like I wasn't heard. What I was trying to say was the discussions that then happen when you are in a diverse, sitting on a diverse bench are quite different. I have found in my own experience, if you've got a predominantly white bench, the discussions are quite different in the times that I've said it. So I think you can clearly see, because if that wasn't an issue, there wouldn't be any need for diversity, because yes, we do have guidelines. Yes, we do have, you know, the legal advisors and everything. But the reason that people are still saying we need diversity is because that lived experience, that history that I bring to the table still does matter on that bench.
Wow. I can see that your response has got Atiha to raise her hand. So I'll wait for the response from Atiha and then go to Kofo before we start going on to our last couple of questions and close the session.
Just wanted to quickly give an example, really, which I thought might be useful. So I remember once I was sitting as a magistrate, and there was an Asian family in front of us, and for whatever reason in those days, I think they had brought their faith leader to come and speak on behalf of that situation. So it was a domestic violence case. And I remember that because of my language, this is about what I can give contribution to in that process. And my language was, I could understand the language of the case. And I was able to ask my colleagues on the bench to retire, so I could have that conversation with them to say that the interpretation wasn't good enough, and that we should step this case down so that we can get a proper interpreting service in for this case that is independent of the faith leader or whoever's been brought in by the person. So these are early days. I know these things absolutely don't happen now. That people are have to use independent interpretation services. But that was a good reason for me being on the bench, because my two white colleagues would not have understood the language and picked up what I had picked up. So I come back to the point of teamwork, that there is a need, not just in terms of the diversity, but in terms of different skills sets. So different language skills are really important for the demographic of our communities. So the language can be picked up, and the nuances on that can be picked up, and you can give proper justice and say, hold on, step this down, get the proper support in for the family so that they are well represented, and the right thing happens there. So that's what you're there for. You're there for your skills and your knowledge, and bring all of that in to support the good justice system.
Yeah, you've got agreement from Epiphania, and I think it's so special that it just happened to be you were on that case where you could pick that out. It could have easily been someone from a different nation, even if it was still diverse. If they didn't speak the language, if they weren't able to pick up the cultural cues, that perhaps there was some sort of bias in the language, and it wouldn't have come from a place of ignorance or being cruel. And it's just amazing how something that is just intrinsic to you has made such a difference for that particular family's case. So the more people we have, pretty please. Kofo, I think I'm going to switch the question up slightly for you, just in terms of from what you've seen with the people that you've supported into work and your position in the community as well. What is the kind of influence or the kind of power that you feel comes with the kind of role of being a magistrate, beyond the technical aspects of you're in a position to sentence, to be part of the team where you decided someone's fate, but what kind of influencing potential is there beyond the actual courtroom with being a magistrate?
Well, I was going to say Atiha and Cody have spoken well. That should be their question because they are magistrates. That being said, I think I wouldn't use the word power. I think I'll call it responsibility, because with power comes responsibility. Once you attain such positions in the civic life, you have a responsibility to yourself and to your community, you see. Because most communities are playing, catch up. And so you have a responsibility to be a trailblazer. And one of the things I do say to people also to get involved is if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And we live in a political world. If you're not at the table, you are definitely on the menu, and people have their forks and knife out, So you have to one way or the other, be at the table, whether it's in your child's school, wherever, you find yourself, not for power, but for responsibility. So much responsibility comes with that, in the sense whereby you get the opportunity to sit down and speak with decision leaders, and they can hear directly from you that represents the community. Even though I don't have a position as a magistrate, I've had the opportunity to sit down with the right people and be able to change national laws over a coffee without carrying a placard or anything. So yes, you need to be in the room. So much can change. National laws can change, global laws can change. And I'm saying that from experience. Thank you.
I really appreciate that. Again, a succinct response. And yeah, a national law being changed over a cup of coffee. I don't think a lot of us recognize how much power, a lot of the time, how much responsibility, influence, how much potential we have to make a difference. And things can look very elusive, like you have to be in a specific position, or you have to have a very specific qualification or skill set in order to do things. So it's thank you so much for that reminder that change can happen in a lot of places, but you got to be there to make it happen, right? So on that note, then I would say, is there anything at all, Cody, that you'd like to bring to the space before we throw it open for the Q&A? There you go, you're ready.
All right. I think maybe as a new magistrate, I might give someone who's thinking about it some of the things that you have to consider. So we know that if you want to buy a car next year, you need to get your driver's license this year, because otherwise you can't drive it. One of the things that they do emphasizing is becoming an upstanding member of society. So if you're thinking about becoming a magistrate, you need to make sure you're not breaking any even traffic laws, you're not driving someone's car uninsured, you're not drunk driving, you're not doing any of those things, because those things might stand against you. They are tiny little things, because for me, before I became this, I was a law-abiding citizen anyway, but then it's quite surprising and quite scary how many laws people break on a daily basis without even realizing. So if you are thinking that you want to be on this path, I think that is one of the things that you have to start looking at now, how you conduct yourself, your social media, and you're going to be somebody that someone or the community is going to look up to. So start presenting yourself, start turning out the way you want to be called.
That is magical. Thank you so much. Is there anything else from Kofo and Atiha before we start bringing in the questions? We've got more claps for you, Cody. Wonderful. Okay. Right. I think we can go straight into the Q&A. One of the questions that has already come up is with regards to finding current opportunities. Now, Erin has already said that, I can't find any opportunities on there. So the question that I would like to propose during this Q&A right now is, what do you do in the meantime? How can you help yourself? Beyond being, an outstanding member of society in the UK and making sure you present yourself the way you want to be perceived and the way you think appropriate, what are the practical things that you can do to help make the path to being a magistrate clearer and just more possible while there are no vacancies? This is to anyone, by the way.
Shall I come in then?
Feel free, Atiha.
Yes, I don't think there's anything you can do to kind of build yourself up to before the magistrate vacancy comes, because we don't know when those vacancies come. They do come, absolutely, and you need to, look for that. But I think, as Cody said, it is about being an upstanding member of society, isn't it? And I think we all will be that, and it's about continuing to be focused around how you do that and being involved with things that support others to do that. So It might be that you're engaged in community work that is supporting people to understand how laws are applied in this country, about how we need to think about ourselves in terms of our standing, what kind of organizations we might get involved with. These might be quite useful things, when it comes to a vacancy and you're applying. These are the kinds of things on your CV, I suppose, that will be quite outstanding, that you're an outstanding member of the community already, you support a lot of organizations, you are involved with community development, you're involved with work with young people about how to keep out of trouble, you're involved with telling new communities arriving here how the laws are applied here, being good citizens, running citizenship programs. Those sorts of things are quite useful in terms of what you do. I'd say they're quite useful for a lot of things you might want to do, not just be a magistrate. There are lots of other civic duties that you could do.
Appreciated. Before I go to our first raised hand, Cody, Kofo, do you have anything to add to that with regards to what you can do while awaiting the opportunity at all? Because I know that when I was interested and thought I might have time and capacity to do it, a big part of what they asked was, have you been into a court? Do you know what actually happens in a courtroom? And they required that you had attended at least one session or two sessions before you actually apply to see what happens in criminal court, because you can't go into family court. So yeah, are there any things like that you could share with us, please, Cody? Thank you.
For me, I hadn't attended court, well, apart from when, like I said, with my son, there wasn't any requirement to have attended, maybe because I did my application during lockdown. So even my court observations, I had to do them online. So the one thing that I found is there's not really anything. And the one thing that I found was there's not really much online that can help you before the process actually start. So even though I knew I was on this journey, and I'm that one person who wants to be well prepared, I am dyslexic, and it's like some of these things I get overwhelmed. So I want to do my homework before I get to the place, so I'm not flustered, because I easily get flustered. There wasn't any way where I could find a lot to prepare myself, but the process itself is very, very rigorous, and it needs to be, because it's like someone's life depends on it. So you're gonna have to be very patient. My application took 2 years from when I first applied to when I then got a letter saying I had been appointed. So it's a very long process. It's very rigorous, and the whole process, when it's going on, is not because you're Black or somebody doesn't like you. It's just the process, because we do tend to think, oh, my process is taking too long because, or maybe it's because I'm this, I'm the other. The whole process is quite long and is quite drawn out, and for the obvious reasons, because you want, if you're standing in front of those 3 magistrates, you want them to head the right training, you want them to be the right people to be deciding on your fate. Then the other thing that I wanted to point out, I've forgotten. But yeah, basically, yeah, that's it. I didn't have to do my court observations until I'd submitted my first application, and there are then 3 separate interviews that I had to do. And then you do have to have your the other things that come after that. But yeah, the one thing that I'll tell you is a very long, rigorous process.
Thank you so much. So adjust your expectations accordingly. I really wish I applied back then now. I probably would have had time to consider it by now. Kofo, do you have any more before I go to Amira? Oh, fantastic. Amira, would you be able to come on camera, really, please, if you don't mind, and come off mute and ask your question?
Let me see the camera now that you set in.
Although you do have a wonderful profile picture, so.
Oh, thanks for that. Oh, okay. Let me see. Yeah. All right. So actually, I think you've answered Atiha about what to do meanwhile, because there's a lot of, you know, the names I recognize in the Zoom meeting here, that most of them are people who are actually active in the community. I think that's why they're interested in that post. But in my opinion, I have always a big issue about being a good citizen and who defines this in a certain way, because sometimes being a good citizen can actually stop you from doing a lot of good stuff. I'm a trade unionist by nature, and I do and protest and do a lot of stuff that I feel that they are good for the community. And actually, I'm the chair for the Northwest Black Members Committee, and we do a lot of activities that may not be seen as politically right, but they are, if you see what I mean. So sometimes if you do not fit in that, it's totally fine, because you still help the community by being maybe a protester with a certain belief you have or values you sort of fight for. So it might be not for everybody, you know, I mean, for me, being a magistrate will not stop me from doing what I want to do as a trade unionist or as opposing to certain things in the government, and that actually also changes laws and makes a difference with the voice of the community. So I just get a bit worried when I hear about good citizen, let's say, because you know what, sometimes, well, we have possibly ministers who supposedly good citizens, and we don't really agree with them. So this is a bit of a.
So is the question about what are the feelings around the notion of being a good citizen? Is it around necessarily like what are the definitions, or are there any definitions? Is it ultimately?
We are at a time, sorry to interrupt you, but we are at a time of actually trying to shift systems, because systems are not good enough for us. And they're not helpful, especially for the minority, or let's say the people with protected characteristics. So we cannot abide by the rules, all the rules, because we're enabling the system to continue. So I know this sounds a bit maybe different, but
Yeah.
I think it's essential, because we cannot change. For example, we're still fighting for
I completely understand that, Amira. I think as far as what we've seen, perhaps the most consistently between Cody, Kofo, and Atiha, is this idea of there needs to be the difference in thought. There needs to be the diversity in the way people approach things in order for us to get that improvement, in order for us to do better and serve the people. And you're a member of the community, and regardless of what the status quo may be, the fact that you are in a position where you are working in the community, you are fighting, and you are doing what you're doing, how that fits into a particular role, being able to do the work that you want to do, I guess it's how long is a piece of string, you know? But I think it's a really important point that we have room for those challenges, because things don't get better unless we're able to respond to that. And I'm going to pass over to Cody. Thank you so much for taking the time to say that with us, to share that with us, Amira. And I'll listen out for Cody's response.
The reason I wanted to come in is I was quite open and honest that when I started my journey, it came from a place of wanting to change. And the process then taught me that when you're looking for justice, you can't just look for justice for yourself. It has to be justice for everyone. When you want to change, if you then want to bring in only the ideas that fit you, then we are not talking justice, we are talking something different. It doesn't make it wrong, it just makes it different. So I'm not saying that what you're doing is wrong, but what I'm saying is the justice is 360, it's all encompassing, it looks at everybody. And where I'm not saying that change the way that you think and feel, there are times where I have to take my ideas out on the porch and take a baseball bat to them and say, because the way I understand myself and the way things are, does this then make somebody else's opinion wrong? Because I believe that I might not accept the way you think, I might not agree with what you think, but I'm gonna fight it like hell to give you that opportunity to express how you think. So when you go through the process, it doesn't mean necessarily that you've got ideas that are different or you fight for, because the process is the process. It's either what you have done or your past or whatever you've done will allow you to get through the process. And I have been quite clear about saying some of the things that are, some of the requirements do stop certain people. They're quite preventative for some people to then get to the process. But then I also think we have to understand that the law has to be for everyone. And when you do sit in that chair, you're not allowed to change the law. You're only allowed to work within the guidelines to deliver the ruling that you're supposed to be there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but then that's what I wake up every day to do. I might have my own ideas and I stand by them and I'm so passionate about them. But when I'm sitting in that chair, I've got a job to do. And for me, changing the law, I don't do it when I'm sitting in that chair. I have to do it somewhere else. But in that time, there are things that are expected of me, regardless of how I feel. I have to come in and do what I was called in to do.
Thank you so much. I think it's so important and so valuable to have that perspective of the different spaces, that different types of change need to happen for the greater good. And sometimes it can feel as though unless you see a certain change or something happening everywhere at once, it's not happening. Whereas they're often like building blocks that fit in to create that bigger picture. So thank you for being so open with that, Cody. Atiha, I'll come to you, and then I'll come back to Kofo for some wrapping up words.
Just really quickly, just coming back to Amira, because I completely understand what she's talking about. Firstly, I agree that being a magistrate isn't for everybody. Absolutely. And this is just one option. And I don't think this program should be saying, here's what you should be doing. This is just one of many things that you can do in your life. And it's your choice of what's of most interest to you. Like, for example, on that point of had I observed court sittings before I sat as a magistrate? Yeah, I had. I was a weird person. I like going to court to see what was happening. Even through my A-levels time, actually, I used to go to our local courts and just sit in, because you can do that. Were you that kind of person who was interested in justice and in what happens in courts and reads about stuff like that? And I'd already done a lot of that. So that's what I mean about it's not just that, oh, well, I want to be a magistrate and now I'll go and do my 2 sittings and stuff. You've got to kind of say, well, that actually is something I'm deeply interested in, and it fits in with everything that I've got interest in, and that's how it is. It's not for everybody. The other thing I'd say to you, Amira, that I never left my values and what I stand for. So if I want to go and protest for peace, I will protest for peace. It shouldn't stop you from believing in good and in justice. That's what it's about. You're not in contradiction with what the courts are trying to do. What they are worried about is people who come in as a magistrate with extreme opinions and views on certain things that hinder you from kind of having a more objective view when you're listening, because you're coming in with particular set views on things, and they might think, oh, well, are these really set things that can that person have a wider view when they're hearing things? They're the types of things. It's not necessarily trying to catch you out. So I don't feel that in my life I've ever given up what I believe in and done all of those things. And you can flip that, because if you're somebody who has supported justice like that, because you believe that there's sometimes a system goes wrong. So when you're sitting there, even in a court, and the system's presenting things to you, you might find some problems in the system, and they might come through on the bench as mitigating issues because you've found some gaps in there and you've supported somebody. That I quite often saw that when a lot of parents got fines for children not going to school, for example. And could see the system. There was things going on that were, could have been better to support the parents. So you as a magistrate, you bring those up and say, actually, systematically, there's some issues here, so mitigation needs to come in. So I think you can flip what you're saying, Amira, by a positive, to say, actually, I see all of this, and that's why I feel that I'd like to be part of that.
Thank you for that elaboration, Atiha. That is, and Amira's acknowledged it, saying that's absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much. So Kofo, you are the person I'm coming to before we wrap up our wonderful time with our gracious panel. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And just to add to what has been said earlier, I was one who made a statement that was able to change national laws without raising a placard or a cup of coffee at bread. I think there is space for everybody, right? And everybody is needed. We need people who are protesting. I also need people who walk into the room, right? They are both doing great works, and their work should both be recognized. One does not take the place of another, firstly. Secondly, I think in a way I understand where Cody is coming from, you see, and I'm going to be blunt, as a Black man, we're judged more harshly, or as a Black woman, you're judged more harshly, you see. I know if you study the nation after a while, you realize that politicians are moralized society and moralized politics, right? They tell you can do anything, but when you want to get into the room, they put all the rules, regulations, and red tapes, in there. You see. So it is essential you are of a certain behavior of a certain standard to walk into a certain room. And I will end it up with this analogy. In war, you have the soldiers and you have the spies. When the spies go into a room, they don't, there's a way they go into a nation, to absorb themselves into a nation. They don't go into the nation protesting. Yes, you have the guys protesting, but you have people who are ready to walk into the room who still hold their values, but there's a way they walk into the nation to make the change they want to make, you see. They will always see you coming when you come in with a noise, right? Which there's a space for that, right? But there's a space for people who need to go with the set rules and regulations. You're dealing with archaic systems that have been there for hundreds of years. You can't just pull it down. You need people on the inside and you need people on the outside. And you need people, which is what I said to you earlier on, is it is a session where we get in, you don't forget who you are and you don't forget why you are in, you see. So I believe both people are needed, both people on the outside of the parliament and both people on the inside of the parliament making this change, you see. So yeah, that is it for me. Thank you so much, Flourish Together, for having us.
Wow, that has absolutely surpassed my expectations. I had very high expectations anyway, knowing our speakers, but it's been incredibly informative. I really hope everyone who has attended has also found that value in the time and the generosity and the vulnerability and the openness that has been in the space. So on that note, unless anyone's got a last minute question they want to pop in, we've got claps from Epiphania. Thank you so much. Unless anyone's got any question they want to ask now, I'm going to say thank you all for attending. We will be having another session as part of the Building Legacy program. Our next webinar will be next month, and it'll be about becoming a counsellor. So looking at a different way that we can support in the community, that we can engage in community, as Atiha, as Kofo and Cody have already mentioned, there are different roles and different ways that we can be represented, be representative and engage in our society. So on that note, Thank you so very much for your time, Cody, Kofo, and Atiha. I am so grateful to you. And I'm going to pass over to Michaela because she's really keen to
I'm
speak.
here, Almy. I've been listening in. Wow, what a session. We knew these webinars would be good, but it was, fantastic learning, fantastic insights, and so important, in terms of the breadth of range of perspectives to get more of you into this kind of public roles. So yeah, as Aishatu's mentioned, and thank you, fantastic sharing there, good stuff. What Aishatu didn't mention, obviously the next one coming up is going to be on counselling, but then we've got a third one in the series. It's around being a school governor, and Aishatu has been a school governor herself, so she'll be joining that panel rather than chairing it. So we're going to do the 3 in the series as part of this, so do look out for the dates on these. We're just firming them up, but I'm going to let you get back to your day, to your lunch, and yeah, learn from this sort of inspiring thinking, and hope that those listening on Listen Again sessions and recaps find it just as useful and inspiring as we have here on the call today. So huge thanks, and we'll hopefully see you at the next one, and we'll be emailing you details just as soon as those dates are arranged. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you very much.